Hey everybody, welcome to Monday. Tomorrow I'm gonna do a video. I had a bit of an epiphany on the weekend over why game reviews don't work the way uh reviews are supposed to, which is giving you a sense of what it's like to play a game so that you can decide whether you like it. But I have to do a preamble because, oh man, like, we gotta talk. we gotta talk, we gotta talk, we gotta talk. I don't know what's going on. I don't know exactly why people are getting so upset over stuff that doesn't require and shouldn't warrant getting as upset as some people are. But I have a theory, and that's what I'm going to talk about today as a preamble to tomorrow. So if you like this sort of content, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. I'll just start, you know. We're at a time that is always very difficult in the gaming community, in that it's politics. It's an election cycle in the US. And no matter what those of us who don't live in the US do, we get sucked into it. And then you get people saying basically, you know, you can't possibly know anything about American politics, so you're not allowed to have an opinion. Which I did the mocking voice because anytime somebody says you're not allowed to have an opinion, something's wrong, right? And they don't come out and say it, but the reason they're saying it is basically just shut up. You can't possibly know what you're talking about. And that's not true. It's possible to have a view on US politics as somebody who doesn't live in the US. That is not the same view as somebody who lives within the US. And if you watch my content, especially on Twitch, I say I have no ability to understand what motivates US voters. And the problem is the rest of the world. And you know, it's worse in presidential cycles, but the midterms are pretty bad too. We watch Americans act like they just want to exterminate each other from the face of the earth every 2 years. And let me tell you, that amount of drama is infectious. It's impossible to sort of stay calm and balanced when dozens of people you know are actively acting like there's some sort of blood feud going on. And that intersects, I know, charged term, but hear me out, with some issues that happen in gaming in particular, in that people who play video games seem to have, and I wish somebody would do a study on this to be sure, but seem to have a higher rate of anxiety, post-traumatic stress, so on and so forth in the general population. I mean, it makes sense that a hobby that allows you to be solitary with other people, you know, if something happens in an online interaction, you can turn off the game, get away fairly safely. It doesn't plague you in the same way, except in really extreme circumstances, which happen far too often. But you know, a lot of gamers seem to really value the safety of video games, and that's been, the perception of safety has been compromised by the culture wars that have been going on for 5 damn years now. Some can track it. One metric is tracking it back to Gamergate. The other is tracking it back to the whole Tropes versus Women Kickstarter fiasco. Pick whichever metric you want. Years and years and years of this crap is too long. And one of the big issues in gaming is that we don't have the community leaders that other organizations have that are empowered to go, hey, knock it off. And some people could, if they were willing to take a risk, but they're not willing to take a risk, so they don't. And we have this leadership vacuum within gaming. First of all, of people setting an example of grown-up behavior. And as a YouTuber, I will say part of the problem is a lot of the so-called, community leaders or thought leaders in gaming. It comes through either, clickbait game sites or YouTube, which is its own form of clickbait, where, really successful YouTubers tend to game the algorithm. I don't like doing that. It's a great way to go insane, which means I'll have periods like during The Last of Us 2 where my traffic goes up tenfold and then it settles back down. This time of year, I find it's slower to begin with, so I'm not worrying too much about the content this week. Yay. Because I'm working on boss fight editing, and it's hard to have outward brain and inward editing brain at the same thing. You see all the image, the visual imagery that's going on in my brain. But the lack of leadership and the lack of structural opportunities for leadership mean that you've got a lot of people in survival mode. You've got a lot of people in constant hypervigilance. Like they're either avoidant, they try to avoid it completely, don't want to talk about it all, or, they're hypervigilant, which means they jump and go crazy at the slightest thing. And of course, these are two pillars of PTSD. And then I'm sure there's a lot of people who spend a lot of time dwelling on bad experiences in the past. So we've basically got a community that's induced this form of post-traumatic stress that I believe is infectious. I see people picking it up from each other. And so the normal how-tos of, good mental health maintenance, good, emotional maintenance don't work, because human beings, no matter how introverted you are, profoundly introverted right here, people do pick up on the feelings of other people. And, no one's totally immune from that. I don't think even psychopaths are totally immune by it. They have an atypical response, but they're not totally immune to that. And there's work that needs to be done there. Because, the typical self-talk is that, you take steps to minimize catastrophizing, which, one thing goes bad, it's going to be the end of the world, or I'm afraid something's going to go bad, and it's going to be this, it's going to be this, it's going to be this. The reason that self-talk doesn't work in gaming circles is because for many years people did that, and a lot of people believed that their community was sort of yanked out from under them while they were thinking, there's no possible way that could actually happen, right? So you're not gonna get anywhere telling people to sort of don't worry about it. What's the worst that can happen? Well, the worst that can happen is, it's happened. Censorship in games, game developers developing for the lowest common denominator, meaning playing it safe and not offending as opposed to taking risks and innovating, and a period where there have been some legit amazing bright spots in video games this cycle. It's unfortunate that we mark the passage of time in gaming via console cycles, but that seems to be our passage of time marker. Most of the truly amazing games have been like PlayStation exclusives. There are, like I said, there are others. There are exceptions. I mean, Cuphead was originally an Xbox game, and Cuphead's excellent. We'll see about Cyberpunk. I mean, everybody's waiting for Cyberpunk to kind of put the punctuation. Is it gonna be, just a period, or is it gonna be an exclamation mark? Or is it gonna be like a semicolon? Just, we're waiting for next gen. But I mean, games like The Amazing Spider-Man, games like Ghost of Tsushima, games like I maintain Death Stranding, and there's an example of a game. It's not for everyone. Some people are not going to connect to it at all, but that experience of getting to the end of that game and having, total hardcore gamers just going, I'm not crying, you're crying, those moments are real. And you only get those moments if you sacrifice mass appeal for something that's really going to target particular people. Now, of course, AAA game companies often don't do that. So kudos to Sony. And I mean, Ubisoft's done some very interesting things. Odyssey was a great game. There's a good third party, and people, no, it was a good game. Okay, if you don't like open world games, you don't like open world games, whatever. But it's a good open world game. What else I got? I'll look for more stuff. But there's been, Overcooked 2. My husband and I love the crap out of that. But I think of the PS3, Xbox 360 generation, and the PlayStation, like the PS2 generation, the PlayStation generation. There were a lot more huge, amazing phenom games. Now, part of that is that more new IPs were launched. God of War, how could I forget God of War? God of War is a great game, but PlayStation exclusive again. And what PlayStation's been doing is taking those risks. Now, they're taking those risks, but then the casualty of that has been smaller Japanese developers that end up having their more fan servicey games censored. My understanding is just because PlayStation does not want trouble. They don't, they have left the cultural litmus tests up to the California office. And my God, the worst place to get a pulse on the rest of North America is California. That state exists in its own unique bubble. It's funny, you go to anywhere in the US that isn't like New York and Chicago have similarities. And then Chicago and Atlanta have similarities, which means there's kind of a connection between Atlanta and New York. There's some crossover there. You get to California? No, man. No. You'd think, New York, Chicago, Atlanta, California, they're, Los Angeles. I'm talking about California state. Los Angeles and that whole area, that whole Southern California area, and then up into kind of central with the Bay Area. That's another fucking planet. It's the worst place in the world to really understand what the rest of the continent is thinking and feeling. Even if they were in New York, it would be better. New York feels a little bit like Toronto, only louder. Seattle, there's sort of a vibe with Vancouver, but LA is so out of touch. And so they're calling the shots for this entire company, except for these big AAA IPs that sell systems kind of thing. And for everyone that went horrendously wrong, like The Last of Us 2, they had a lot of Horizon Zero Dawn, and, they had a lot of really good exclusives this cycle. And I wish that other game companies, and I think that my prediction for Ubisoft as a company is that they are going to start opening up a bit more again. I mean, there's a Far Cry game that got crapped on with casting and all that stuff, but every Far Cry game gets crapped on, and then the game comes out and does very well. So, I mean, there's an example of a franchise that resists cancellation, right? And then Assassin's Creed takes some risks. I wish Assassin's Creed would take more risks if one of the things Ghost of Tsushima did is showed that there's plenty of people who still like that old Assassin's Creed formula. And I get the issue with the people getting lost in that Assassin's Creed 2 was, I don't know how many games. It was allegedly a trilogy, but there seemed to be so many other games at that point. I don't know. But people got lost in that meta story with the first Civ and all that sci-fi stuff. I hope they bring that back and just sort of reestablish that because I miss that stuff. I miss that sci-fi element of Assassin's Creed instead of just historical fantasy, but I digress. And like I said, Cyberpunk, I'm hoping, will blow the roof off and be a really great slingshot into you don't have to appease the cancel culture hordes to sell a ton of games. And I find that fear so strange because, I mean, Grand Theft Auto is this phenomenon, and I get that, companies are like, yeah, but we're not Grand Theft Auto, that's its own thing, and rightly so. But take some risks you can defend. I mean, if anybody watching at Sony is curious, like, I'm playing through Senran Kagura Burst Renewal right now, basically on a dare. And what's surprising to me is how not offended I am by everything. I said while I was playing it just seems like, what a 12 to 14-year-old boy's idea of girls is like. And I don't know, I find it oddly charming in almost the innocence of the perv. I mean, yes, there's, panty peek and there's, girls wearing nothing but strategically placed lighting. But I mean, what's really happening? It's at very worst, it's putting these girls up on pedestals, not saying these women are objects you can just hurt for your own personal gratification. You know what I mean? Like, I see nothing harmful in these fan service games. And I can't say that's true of some other fan service games I've played where there's a lot of crying and not crying because you're embarrassed, like hurt comfort fan fiction kind of territory. But it's been a while since I played a game like that, so I may be forgetting certain context. But yeah, with Senran Kagura, it's the women are doing stuff. They have personalities. They have likes and dislikes. It is just, a lot of jiggle and panty peek. I don't, that's not the stuff we need taken out of games as much as we need the idea. If any idea needs to be discouraged, so to speak, because I don't agree with, striking down concepts with certain things being verboten. I think that it's all about the way it's handled, not the subject. But there's been all this stuff about glorifying violence and glorifying objectification of women. But what about this idea of glorifying the idea that people who disagree with you are evil enemies who need to be destroyed? How about we work on that idea? And how about we take that idea off the table for a while, And maybe create some games. And there are plenty of games that do this. But maybe the people who are concerned about social consciousness in gaming work on, hey, somebody who disagrees with me is a human being too. But that's really hard to do when everybody's in this state of hypervigilant, avoidant trauma. And the prescription for that isn't, if you Google, like, like the stuff online. It'll tell you, do self-talk and say what could happen. Why is this idea logical? That's not where you start. You have to be mentally healthy to do that process. That's the problem. What you actually have to do is figure out what you have control over in your life. And stop fighting the battles that are so big that you really have no control over the outcome, which is the exact opposite of what a lot of people in gaming have been doing of late. And I'm telling you this from my own experiences, a year in trauma therapy. What I had to do to not, every night at around 11 to 11:30, I would get this, I could tell exactly what time it is, just by the ungodly fear of dread and this fight or flight response I'd get, because the body remembers trauma. And I wasn't thinking of anything. I wasn't talking myself into it. I feel this, and this isn't like me. You guys know I'm very cerebral. I'm a thinking person, not a feeling person. And so that was very unnerving. And one of the big problems with being, identified gifted at a young age and having that label slapped on you is people, especially adults, treat you like these walking brains instead of fully formed people. And so you get this sense that your entire purpose in life is to be smart and to grant knowledge to other people instead of being a well-rounded person who, hey, kind of sort of me, want to be valued for other things. And I think that might be where some of the attitudes towards women are going wrong in gaming. Because don't forget, I'm a woman. And, these women who are into computers, they had that same degendering that I did. I just saw it for what it was. And working in the media, where suddenly I went from being walking brain to dumb slut in a matter of 6 months. It was the damnedest thing. It was like evil Cinderella. Right? This evil fairy godmother and showed up. Hey, nerd girl, you're a dumb slut now. Poof. Right? It was something. Like, I got to make a game or do a book or something like that about that one day. It kind of did me a favor because now I see it from both sides and go, hey, wait a minute. I was never just a walking brain. And I was never just a dumb slut. And there's no way I was both at the same time because you can't be a walking brain dumb slut. It's inherently contradictory. But this is the problem, that everybody has had this label slapped on them. And the truth is that everybody fighting over this stuff, really, and I say this as somebody who knows people on both sides of this culture war. What is said in private, when it's not performative, it's a serious conversation, sounds eerily similar. Everyone thinks this hobby they have that was a lifeline for them is going to be taken away by somebody. And we need people in positions of authority. And I think Ubisoft is a good company to do this. Sony could, if it stopped being so afraid. And I'm not trying to call these companies out. I'm just saying I think they're uniquely. Activision, if they could get off their ass, but Activision's corporate structure doesn't provide for this. If, instead of every game franchise having to be essentially the same thing with, changes around the edges, the Ubisoft formula. Now that Ubisoft's doing a shake-up anyway, have your games for the sort of one side, the people who are very sort of conscious, for lack of a better term. Make them good games, but make them more sort of on the story side. And then make the games for the core gamers that have that everything's larger than life phenomenon. And make it defensible. Make sure you get people in there who will be this is, and I'll talk about more of this later on this week, this sort of experiment happened that's fascinating. But, make sure it's defensible, like Bayonetta kind of territory. But make those games for people and release them release your conscious game and then release your over the top, straight up kind of not fan service, but you know what I mean? Fan service adjacent. Release them in like one per quarter. And so everybody's got something. And then we need to stop having these games that people feel the need to play to talk about it. Now, I think Twitch has solved that problem. I don't think we need to worry about that shit anymore because you can watch a game on Twitch to talk about the plot, to talk about depictions and all that stuff. We don't have to worry about that anymore. Yay, Twitch. So make games for both, because there are, as much as all these culture warriors have more in common, no, really, trust me, the good faith ones have more in common than separates them. There are certain things they're just never going to agree on, and those are matters of taste. They frame it as morality, but it's really not. They're matters of taste. And then now that, you know, the two groups are both feeling directly appealed to, maybe things will calm the fuck down. And yeah, one group will scream and yell at the one game, but you didn't expect that group to buy that anyway. And the other group will scream and yell at the other types of games, but you never expected that group to buy those games anyway. And take the screaming and yelling from the right people as evidence you're doing something right, instead of something to be afraid of. Now, the fucking marketing departments have got to get behind this. They're the ones that are the problems here. I'm looking at you, marketing departments. They're the ones that are super risk averse and don't want any bad PR. And I think that's why I have high hopes for Cyberpunk, because they don't seem to have that problem with marketing bedwetting. But let me know what you guys think about this, because this shit isn't good for anybody except Sony first party. Western first party. Sony Western first party. And I mean, the idea of Japanese games is, there are games that they make for the Japanese market that have to sell hundreds of thousands of copies. And then there's games they want to sell in the West, and those have to sell millions of copies. And I'll tell you, having played things like Nier Automata that require smaller budgets because smaller expectations of sales, there's jank in them, but there are a lot more kind of interesting, risky ideas. And that's the sandbox I want to play on. And then there's Tsushima. Oh my god, that game's so good. Anyway, that's my take on this. Like I said, tomorrow is going to be about why game reviews aren't serving their purpose. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. $1 a month if you watch one video a month. That's worth it, right? Thanks for watching.